Nate, how fast can you change that tire in this rain?
6 minutes, maybe. He doesn't have 6 minutes.
He doesn't have 6 minutes.
A blown tire, a dead phone. A man in a $1,000 coat collapsed on wet pavement.
Please, my heart. I need a hospital. The tire. I couldn't.
Sir, look at me. Look at me. Look at me. I'm Solomon. We're gonna get you there.
3 brothers. Broke. Exhausted. A shift that paid $85 between them. And a stranger dying on a road nobody else stopped on. Solomon gripped the old man's trembling hand.
You got 4 minutes, Nate, not 5. 4.
He had no idea who was dying in his hands. And what came next? None of them were ready for it. God, but why did he stop? To get that, you need to hear where this man was coming from. But to understand why Solomon stopped that night, why he didn't just call 911 and keep driving like everyone else, you have to understand what he was already carrying. Let's rewind. 12 hours earlier, 6 in the morning, Prospect Avenue. A block that's been tired for a long time, but never quite gave up. Solomon Taylor unlocked the front door of Taylor & Sons Auto Body the same way he did every single day, with a key that stuck, a shoulder shove, and a prayer that the lights would turn on. They did. Barely. The fluorescents buzzed and flickered like they were thinking about it. The shop was a cinderblock garage on the corner. 2 hydraulic lifts. One hadn't worked in over a year. A boombox on the counter playing old R&B, same station his father used to play. Hand-painted sign out front. The letter S in Sons had faded so bad you could barely read it anymore. This place was built by Curtis Taylor Sr., Solomon's father. He died 4 years ago. Complications after a stroke. He was 58. Went to bed one night with a headache. Never woke up the same. Their mother, Lorraine, had passed 2 years before that. Cancer. Slow, cruel. The kind that lets you watch. So by the time Solomon was 28 years old, he was an orphan, raising his 2 younger brothers with nothing but a crumbling garage and a promise he made at his father's grave. I'll keep us together. I'll keep the shop alive. He was failing at one of those, and he knew it. The electric bill was 2 months overdue. There was a yellow final notice taped to the register. Solomon had flipped it face down so his brothers wouldn't see. The landlord had called 3 times this week. Solomon deleted every voicemail without listening. Not because he didn't care, because he already knew what they said. He did the books every night on a folding chair in the back office. No computer, that died months ago. Just a calculator, a pencil, and a yellow legal pad full of numbers that never added up. Now let me tell you about his brothers. Nathaniel, Nate, 28. The middle one. Loud. Funny. The kind of guy who could walk into a room full of strangers and have everyone laughing in 2 minutes. But Nate was also a genius with engines. He could diagnose a car by sound alone. Pop the hood, close his eyes, listen, and tell you exactly what was wrong. That gift came straight from Curtis Sr. Nate had a chipped front tooth he couldn't afford to fix. He had sleep apnea that he managed with a second-hand CPAP machine held together with electrical tape. And he had 2 years of volunteer EMT training, back when the neighborhood program still had funding. He called Solomon old man, even though Saul was only 4 years older. Then there was Caleb, 22, the youngest, quiet, thoughtful, always sketching in a composition notebook, bridges, buildings, structures. The kid saw the world in blueprints. 2 years ago, Caleb got accepted into a state university engineering program. Full acceptance. His ticket out. he deferred, because the family couldn't afford tuition. And Solomon couldn't say, "Go, we'll figure it out," because there was nothing to figure out. The money wasn't there. So Caleb sat at the front desk of the shop, answered a phone that barely rang, told himself he'd go back next year. He'd been saying that for 2 years. It wasn't bitterness. It was something quieter than that. A slow ache in the chest that got a little heavier every month. The feeling of watching your dreams sit on a shelf and collect dust, and pretending you're okay with it. That evening, the three of them sat in the shop eating gas station sandwiches for dinner, turkey and cheese still in the plastic. Nate made a joke about the bread being so stale it could patch a tire. Caleb laughed. Really laughed. The kind where his shoulders shook. Solomon watched them. He smiled. But his eyes didn't, because in his back pocket was today's total. $85. 1 oil change. 1 tire rotation. That was it. Rent was $1,400. They were $900 short. Again. Outside the shop, Prospect Avenue was doing what it always did, holding on. The barber shop 2 doors down still had its spinning pole, even though it stuck every 3rd rotation. Pastor Reggie Coleman's church sat on the corner, white paint peeling, but the doors always open. There was a laundromat, a dollar store, and a whole lot of porches where people still waved at each other. Brenda Foster, 80 years old, lived 3 houses from the Taylors, still brought sweet potato pie every Sunday. She'd promised Lorraine she'd look after those boys. And Brenda Foster did not break promises. But the neighborhood was changing. New fences were going up around empty lots. A real estate company had been buying properties. 2 families on the block had already sold and moved. There were rumors a developer wanted to tear down the whole row for luxury townhomes. Solomon didn't talk about it. But you could feel the squeeze, the bills, the shop, the vanishing neighbors, everything closing in, slow and steady, like walls in a room that keeps getting smaller. 9 p.m. They locked up, climbed into their father's old pickup, a 2004 Ford F-150, rust creeping up the wheel wells. But the engine ran clean. Nate made sure of that. He said letting that truck die would be like letting their father die twice. Solomon drove. Nate rode shotgun. Caleb sat in the back, sketchbook on his lap, headphones in. Then the rain started. Not a drizzle, not a shower. A wall of water that came down so hard the wipers couldn't keep up. The road ahead disappeared into black and blur. Solomon leaned forward, squinting through the windshield. 10 minutes from home. 10 minutes from another night of pretending everything was fine. But the universe had other plans for the Taylor brothers tonight. And what they were about to see on Route 31, what most people would have driven right past, was going to change the rest of their lives. Now, what they saw on the side of Route 31 would have made most people call 911 and keep driving. Solomon killed the engine. The headlights cut through the rain and lit up the shoulder. A silver sedan, sleek, expensive-looking, the kind of car none of the brothers had ever worked on, sat crooked on the gravel, tilted hard to the right. The rear tire wasn't just flat, it was shredded, blown apart. The rim had dug into the road like a knife in wet clay. Hazard lights blinked through the downpour. Weak, orange, getting slower. But that's not what made Solomon hit the brakes. The driver's door was wide open. The dome light spilled out into the rain like a wound. And on the ground, right there on the wet pavement beside the car, a man was lying on his side. Old. White. Late 60s, dark wool overcoat soaked through. one hand clutching his chest, the other gripping a phone. Screen still glowing, a 911 call that never connected. No signal, no help, no one coming. He wasn't moving. Nate saw it first. Sol, is that... Solomon was already out of the truck. He ran through the rain, dropped to his knees beside the man, water soaking through his jeans instantly. Didn't care. Sir, can you hear me? The man's eyes opened, glassy, unfocused. His face was gray, not pale, gray, like something underneath the skin had gone wrong. Sweat beaded across his forehead, mixing with the rain. His lips had no color. He tried to speak. His voice came out in pieces. My chest started while I was driving. Pulled over. Tire blew. Tried to call. He held up the phone. The screen showed 4 failed 911 attempts. No signal bars. Nothing. I can't breathe. Please, I need a hospital. Solomon grabbed his wrist, not to comfort him, to check his pulse. It was fast, irregular, jumping around like a broken clock. He looked back at the truck. Nate and Caleb were already running toward him. Nate dropped down next to Solomon. 2 years of volunteer EMT training kicked in before he even thought about it. He put 2 fingers on the man's neck, watched his breathing pattern, checked his pupils with the flashlight from his back pocket. Then he looked at Solomon, and Solomon had never seen that expression on his brother's face before. Sol. Nate's voice was low, steady, but underneath it, urgency like a live wire. This man is having a heart attack. Right now. Not maybe, not soon. Right now. The rain hammered down. Thunder cracked so close the ground vibrated beneath their knees. Solomon looked at the sedan. Shredded tire, rim buried in gravel. That car wasn't going anywhere. He looked at their pickup. The F-150 could make it to Mercy General in 12, maybe 15 minutes. But the truck bed was open. The cabin seats were torn. The suspension was shot. Every pothole would be an earthquake. Nate read his mind. We can't just throw him in the truck, Sol. The ride alone could... If there's a clot moving, the jarring could... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Solomon understood. The sedan had reclining seats, climate control, a suspension that could glide over broken glass. If they could get that car moving, even on a temporary spare, it was this man's best chance. He stared at the shredded tire, stared at the rim dug into gravel, stared at a repair that would normally take 15 minutes in a shop with dry ground and good light. They didn't have 15 minutes. How fast can you change that tire? Nate didn't hesitate. Give me Caleb in 4 minutes. Solomon shook his head. You've got 3. Caleb was already sprinting to the truck bed. He yanked out the floor jack, the tire iron, the emergency kit. His foot slipped on the wet gravel. He went down hard, knee hitting the road, got up, didn't stop, kept running. Nate was flat on his stomach in 2 inches of standing water, checking under the sedan for the spare. Found it. Compact temporary. Small, not ideal, but enough to hold. The clock started. And here's what made it worse. What turned an emergency into something almost impossible. The man on the ground, this stranger they didn't know, had never met, would probably never see again. He was gripping Solomon's hand like it was the only thing keeping him on this side of the line. And Solomon couldn't help with the tire. Because if he let go, if this man's eyes closed and nobody was there talking him through each breath, those eyes might not open again. So Solomon stayed, on his knees, in the rain, holding a dying stranger's hand while his brothers fought a clock they couldn't see. 3 minutes. That's all that stood between this man's heartbeat and silence. And the only people in the world who could close that gap were 3 brothers who couldn't even make rent. But here's the thing about the Taylor brothers. They've been fixing cars since before they could drive, changing tires in their sleep, diagnosing engines by sound, working with busted tools and no budget, and making it work anyway. Tonight, for the first time, fixing a car wasn't about money. It was about a man's heartbeat. Nate moved fast, the kind of fast that only comes from doing something 10,000 times. He was flat on the wet ground, rain hammering his back, flashlight clenched between his teeth. His fingers found the spare tire bracket under the sedan, twisted the release bolt. The compact spare dropped into his arms in 40 seconds. A normal mechanic? 3 minutes minimum. Nate did it in 40 seconds. Caleb, Jack, right here, right now. Caleb slid the floor jack under the frame, pumped the handle. The car started to rise. Then the jack slipped on the wet gravel. The sedan lurched sideways. Metal groaned. Hold it! Hold it! Caleb threw his weight onto the jack, steadied it, pumped again. The car rose, held. Nate grabbed the tire iron, 4 lug nuts. He hit the first one. It spun free. Second one, free. Third one, free. Fourth one, rusted, seized, didn't move. Nate gritted his teeth, pulled harder. The tire iron slipped off the nut, and his hand slammed into the jagged edge of the blown rim. Metal sliced across his palm like a razor. Blood, instant, mixing with the rain. Caleb sawed. Nate, your hand! Nate didn't even look down. He grabbed a shop rag from his back pocket, wrapped his hand in one motion, teeth pulling the knot tight, and put the tire iron back on the nut. Hold the light steady. Don't move. He leaned his full weight onto the iron. Caleb stepped on it too. Both of them. Everything they had. 1 second. 2. 3. Crack! The rust broke. The nut turned. Nate's exhale came out like he'd been underwater for a minute. He ripped the blown tire off, slammed the spare on, threaded all 4 nuts by hand, then torqued them with the iron. 1, 2, 3, 4. Lowered the jack, kicked the tire with his boot. Solid. He checked his phone. 3 minutes, 52 seconds. Under 4. Just like Solomon asked. While Nate and Caleb fought the tire, Solomon was fighting a different battle. He sat on the wet pavement beside the man, rain pouring over both of them. Solomon had taken off his jacket and draped it across the stranger's chest, even though that left him in nothing but a soaked t-shirt. He didn't care. The man was shivering. That mattered more. Sir, what's your name? The man's voice came out thin, broken. George. George, I'm Solomon. My brothers are changing your tire right now. We're going to get you to Mercy General. But I need you to stay with me. Can you do that? George nodded. Barely. Breathe with me. In and out. In and out. That's it. Good. Keep going. Solomon held George's wrist. Not for comfort this time. He was counting the pulse. Under the dim glow of the sedan's dome light, something caught his eye. A watch on George's wrist. Not a regular watch. The face gleamed. Platinum, maybe, with hands that glowed faint blue in the dark. Solomon had seen a lot of watches come through the shop. Cheap ones, knockoffs, gas station specials. This was none of those. He didn't think about it. He was counting heartbeats. But the detail registered, somewhere in the back of his mind, filed away without a label. George's breathing got worse, shorter, faster. His hand squeezed Solomon's so hard the knuckles went white. My daughter, Diane. You have to tell her. You're going to tell her yourself, George. Stay with me. Then George's phone lit up. A call coming in. The screen read, Diane, office. Solomon grabbed it. Answered. A woman's voice, sharp, commanding. The kind of voice used to running things. Dad? The board is waiting. Where are you? Solomon kept his voice steady. Ma'am, this is Solomon Taylor. Your father is having a medical emergency on Route 31. We're bringing him to Mercy General right now. Silence on the other end. 1 second. 2. Then the voice cracked wide open. Every ounce of authority dissolved. Just a daughter. Just fear. Oh God, is he? Please, is he? He's conscious. We've got him. Meet us at the ER. Solomon hung up. George was looking at him, eyes wet, and not from the rain. Thank you, George whispered. Don't thank me yet. We're not done. Nate came sprinting around the car, hand wrapped in a blood-soaked rag, rain streaming down his face. Tire's done! Let's go! They moved like a machine. Solomon lifted George, carefully, one arm under his shoulders, one under his knees, and placed him in the back seat of the sedan. Caleb slid in beside him, put a hand on the old man's shoulder. Stay with us, George. Stay right here. Solomon took the driver's seat. His hands gripped leather, real leather, soft, nothing like anything he'd ever touched. He turned the key. The engine came alive, smooth, powerful, quiet in a way that felt almost unnatural after years of listening to the F-150 rattle and cough. He didn't notice any of it. He was already moving. Nate jumped in the pickup, headlights on full, following right behind. Shortcuts, fast beats, the sedan hydroplaning through flooded intersections. Solomon pushing 60, 70, 80 on a wet road, hands locked on the wheel, eyes locked forward. Red light. He laid on the horn, blew through it. Another red, same thing. Behind him, Nate in the pickup, matching every move. Caleb in the back seat. Holding George's hand, George's grip was getting weaker. Almost there, George. 2 more minutes. Stay with me. George's eyes were half closed. His breathing was shallow. But he nodded. Solomon grabbed his phone with one hand, called 911. Male, late 60s, chest pain, left side, over 60 minutes, ST elevation possible. We're 3 minutes from Mercy General. Have a team ready. The operator started asking questions. Solomon hung up. No time. Mercy General, the ER entrance. Solomon braked hard. The sedan slid to a stop under the fluorescent lights. Nurses were already outside. Solomon's call had worked. A gurney, an oxygen mask, hands everywhere. They lifted George out. Mask went on, monitors clipped to his fingers. The gurney started rolling. And right before he disappeared through those doors, George reached out, found Solomon's wrist, squeezed, weak, trembling, but deliberate. Then his hand fell away. The doors closed. The 3 brothers stood in the ER parking lot. Rain still falling, soaked to the bone, mud on their boots. Nate's hand dripping blood through the rag. A nurse came out, looked at them. Are you family? Solomon shook his head. No, ma'am, we just found him on the road. She stared at them for a long moment. 3 drenched, exhausted young men who'd brought in a dying stranger and asked for nothing. He's lucky you stopped, she said quietly. The doctor said another 15 minutes and we'd be having a very different conversation. 15 minutes. Nate changed the tire in 4. Solomon drove in 10. The margin, the space between life and death, was 1 minute, 60 seconds. George Elliston was alive because 3 brothers who couldn't afford electricity decided that a stranger's heartbeat was worth more than staying dry. Solomon sank into a plastic chair in the waiting room. His clothes dripped onto the linoleum. He leaned his head back and closed his eyes. Nate sat beside him, flexing his cut hand, saying nothing. Caleb opened his sketchbook. The edges were damp. The pencil lines of his bridge drawing had started to blur. He stared at it. This dream that was slowly dissolving, just like the graphite on wet paper. And none of them knew, not even a little bit, what was coming next. Man, come on. Seriously? These three dudes, broke, bleeding, exhausted, just outran a heart attack for a complete stranger. By 1 minute. Now put yourself on that road. Pouring rain, midnight. A man you've never met is dying. You're $900 short on rent. Do you stop? Honestly? An hour later, a woman walked into that waiting room, and the way she carried herself told Solomon this wasn't just some man's daughter. But what he didn't know yet was just how right that feeling was. 90 minutes they sat there. Plastic chairs, fluorescent lights, the smell of antiseptic and wet clothes. Nobody talked much. Nate stared at the ceiling. Caleb stared at his sketchbook. Solomon ran the math in his head. Not hospital math. Rent math. Then the doctor came out. Short woman. Glasses. Clipboard. Are you the three who brought him in? Solomon stood. Yes, ma'am. She told them straight. George had suffered an acute ST elevation myocardial infarction. Blood clot in the left coronary artery. Stent placed. Stable now. Then she paused, took off her glasses. If you had arrived 15 minutes later, even 10, we wouldn't have saved enough heart muscle. The outcome would have been very different. She put her glasses back on. Whatever you did out there tonight, that's the reason he's alive. Solomon exhaled, long, slow, like he'd been holding his breath since Route 31. Nate cracked his knuckles. Caleb blinked hard. 3 times. 4. 20 minutes later, she walked in. Diane Elliston. Early 40s. Sharp blazer over jeans. Hair pulled back. Eyes red, but jaw set. She blew past the brothers. Disappeared into George's room. When she came out, 20 minutes later, she walked straight to Solomon. You're the ones who brought him in? Yes, ma'am. Firm handshake. Practiced. The handshake of someone who shakes 100 hands a week. I'm his daughter, Diane. No last name. She looked at Nate's bandaged hand, their soaked clothes, the mud on their boots. Please, tell me what I owe you. The tire, the drive, everything. Name any number. She pulled out a checkbook, leather-bound, monogrammed. Solomon stood, a full head taller, voice calm but final. Ma'am, you don't owe us anything. We saw someone who needed help. That's all. Diane shook her head, started writing. Solomon placed his hand on the checkbook, not touching hers, just blocking the pen. Our father raised us a certain way. He said you don't put a price on doing the right thing. We're not starting now. Diane held his gaze. Something moved behind her eyes, surprise or maybe recognition. She tore the check, put the book away. He raised you well, she said quietly. Nate, from his plastic chair. He raised us loud too. You should hear Saul sing in the shower. Caleb laughed. Diane cracked the smallest smile of the night. On their way out, Caleb remembered his jacket in the sedan, jogged to the parking lot, opened the back door. There, on the seat, a handkerchief. Cream-colored linen, navy stitching, a monogram in the corner, G.W.E. Caleb pocketed it, figured he'd return it later. Didn't think twice about those initials. But you should. The drive home was quiet. Rain had stopped. Air smelled like wet pavement and cut grass. Solomon drove, windows down. For the first time in months, his shoulders weren't tight. He didn't know why. But something had shifted out on that road. Like maybe keeping his father's promise wasn't just about the shop. Maybe it was about showing up, about stopping when everyone else drives past. He didn't say any of this out loud, but Nate glanced over and saw it on his face. And for once, Nate didn't make a joke. They went to bed thinking it was over. Just another Friday night. A flat tire, a sick man, a trip to the ER. Done. But Solomon couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The house was small. 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that hadn't been updated since the 90s. Caleb's room was across the hall. Nate's was next to the bathroom. Solomon could hear Nate's CPAP machine wheezing through the wall, that taped-together thing rattling like it might give up any night now. But that's not what kept him awake. It was the man, George. Something didn't fit. The watch on his wrist. Solomon had held that wrist, counted the pulse, and even in the dark, in the rain, in the middle of everything, that watch stood out. It wasn't a department store piece. It wasn't even a nice piece. It was something else entirely. Something Solomon had only ever seen behind glass. Then there was the phone call. Diane's voice before she knew what was happening. Not a daughter checking in. A voice used to giving orders. The board is waiting. The board. And the sedan itself. Solomon had driven it to the hospital. He'd been too focused to think about it then, but now, lying in bed, the memory of that steering wheel, that engine, that ride. He'd never felt anything like it. None of it matched an old man with a flat tire on a back road. Solomon picked up his phone, typed 3 letters into Google. GWE. Too vague. A million results. Nothing useful. He deleted it. Put the phone on the nightstand. Told himself it didn't matter. The man was alive. That's what mattered. He closed his eyes. Opened them. Picked up the phone again. Morning. Saturday. Sunlight through dirty blinds. Caleb was in the kitchen making eggs. Nate was on the couch, hand freshly bandaged with actual gauze now, watching sports highlights on the old TV. Solomon walked out to the front porch with a cup of coffee, took a sip, looked out at the street, and stopped. At the end of the block, a black SUV, engine running, tinted windows, just sitting there. Solomon watched it for a full minute. It didn't move. He went back inside. Didn't mention it. Poured more coffee. Glanced through the kitchen window. Another one. Parked on the cross street. Nate called from the couch. "Sol, you good?" "Yeah, fine." The handkerchief was on the kitchen table where Caleb had left it last night. Solomon picked it up. Turned it over. Ran his thumb across the stitching. GWE. This time, he didn't type 3 letters. He typed a full name. George W. Elliston. The screen filled with results, images, headlines, Forbes lists, and Solomon Taylor's hands started shaking. Not from the cold, not from exhaustion, because he had just realized exactly who was dying in his arms last night. Because the man gasping for air on the pavement, the man whose pulse Solomon counted with grease-stained fingers, the man whose hand Caleb held in the dark back seat of a speeding sedan. He wasn't just some traveler with bad luck. He was George William Elliston. And when you hear what that name means, you'll understand why 10 black SUVs were parked on Prospect Avenue. Solomon stared at his phone, scrolled slowly. Each swipe hit harder than the last. George William Elliston, founder and chairman of Elliston Automotive Holdings, one of the largest privately owned automotive conglomerates in the southeastern United States. 38 luxury dealerships across 9 states. a parts manufacturing division that supplied half the independent shops in the region, a philanthropic arm that had donated over $200 million to education and community development. Net worth, $2.4 billion. Billion with a B. Forbes profiles, magazine covers, photographs of George in tailored suits at galas, shaking hands with senators, ringing the opening bell at the stock exchange. And then, the image that stopped Solomon cold. A charity auction photo. George standing beside a display case. Inside the case, a platinum Patek Philippe watch. The same face, the same blue glow hands. The article caption listed the watch's value, $250,000. $250,000. On the wrist, Solomon had grabbed to count a dying man's pulse. On the wrist that had been resting in Solomon's grease-stained, rain-soaked hand while he whispered, "Breathe with me, George." Solomon's shop couldn't make that in 3 years. He sank into a kitchen chair. The phone almost slipped from his fingers. Caleb came over, spatula still in hand. "Sol, what's wrong? You look like—" Solomon turned the phone around. Caleb's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Nothing came out. The spatula dripped egg onto the floor. Nate walked in from the living room, saw their faces. His grin disappeared. "What happened? Who died?" Solomon's voice was flat, quiet, the kind of quiet that comes right before everything changes. "Nobody died. That's the point." He paused. "We saved a billionaire last night, Nate." Silence. 3 brothers in a kitchen that hadn't been renovated since 1994, looking at Forbes photos of the man they'd pulled off a wet road 12 hours ago. Nate grabbed the phone, scrolled, his jaw tightened with every swipe. Elliston Automotive, 38 dealerships, $2.4 billion. Sol, this man owns more car dealerships than we've had customers this month. He set the phone down, looked at his bandaged hand. The hand he'd sliced open, changing a tire for a man who could have bought the entire hospital they drove him to. "I changed a billionaire's tire with a $5 shop rag on my hand." Nobody laughed. It wasn't funny. It was something else. Something none of them had a word for. Now let me take you back, because every clue was there. Every single one. The watch. Remember, Solomon grabbed George's wrist to check his pulse. The dome light caught something. Platinum face, blue glow hands. Solomon filed it away without thinking. That was a Patek Philippe worth $250,000. George was wearing $250,000 on his wrist, while 3 men who were $900 short on rent worked to keep him alive. Solomon's oil-stained fingers had been pressed against a watch worth more than his house, his shop, and his truck combined. The phone call. Diane's voice. "The board is waiting. Where are you?" Not, "Are you coming to dinner?" Not, "The family's worried." The board, as in the board of directors of a billion-dollar automotive empire. Diane wasn't just a worried daughter. She was the vice president of operations for Elliston Automotive Holdings. When Solomon told her about the emergency, the voice that cracked wasn't a VP's. It was a little girl's. But the voice before that, the one asking about the board, that was a woman who ran an empire. The handkerchief. G.W.E. George William Elliston. 3 letters embroidered in navy thread on cream linen, sitting on the Taylor brothers' kitchen table all night long. The answer had been right there, between the salt shaker and yesterday's mail. Every clue, earned, planted, paid off. Solomon looked out the window. 4 black SUVs on the street now, a fifth pulling in as he watched. Nate joined him at the glass. Sal, are those all the same? Black Cadillac Escalades, tinted windows, fleet plates. Identical. Across the street, Brenda Foster was standing on her porch in her housecoat, mouth wide open, coffee mug frozen halfway to her lips. She hollered across the road. Solomon Taylor, what on earth did you boys do? Solomon didn't have an answer. His phone rang. Unknown number. He picked up. A male voice. Professional. Controlled. The kind of voice that's paid to sound calm. Mr. Taylor, my name is Owen Whitfield. I'm head of security for the Elliston family. I'm parked outside your residence. Mr. Elliston was discharged this morning. He and his daughter would like to speak with you and your brothers this morning. Would you be available? Solomon looked at Nate, looked at Caleb, looked at the handkerchief on the table, looked out the window. 8 SUVs now. Yes, sir. We're available. He hung up. Nate was staring at him. So what do we do? Solomon set his coffee down. We go outside. The 3 brothers stepped onto the porch. The street had gone silent. Neighbors on porches, faces in windows, kids frozen on bikes. It felt like the whole block was holding a single breath. 2 more SUVs pulled in. That made 10. Doors opened. All of them. In unison. Men in dark suits stepped out and lined the cracked sidewalk like an honor guard. From the lead vehicle, Diane Elliston. Different from last night. Fitted coat, heels, hair pulled back sharp, full corporate. Behind her, assisted by a tall man in a dark suit, Owen Whitfield. George Elliston stepped out. Fragile, but upright. Pressed shirt, slacks. A small bruise on his left arm from the IV line. He moved slowly, but he moved on his own. George walked up the cracked concrete path toward the Taylor brothers' porch. Stopped at the bottom of the 3 steps, looked up at Solomon, extended his hand. Young man, I believe we never had a proper introduction. He paused. And I owe you a great deal more than that. But George Elliston didn't drive across town with 10 SUVs just to shake hands. He came with a folder. And what was inside that folder would change everything. Not just for the Taylor brothers, but for every family on Prospect Avenue. George didn't ask to come inside. He sat on the porch steps, right there on the cracked concrete where Solomon drank coffee every morning, where Caleb sketched bridges, where Nate fell asleep after 14-hour shifts with his boots still on. He sat where the brothers sat. Diane stood behind him, leather portfolio in her arms. George spoke plainly. No polish, no corporate voice. Just an old man talking to 3 young men who'd kept him alive. The clot was in my left coronary artery. The doctors told me, 15 minutes later, even 10, the damage would have been irreversible. He paused. You didn't give me 15 minutes. You gave me 60 years' worth of Sundays with my grandchildren. Solomon shifted. He wasn't built for speeches or praise. Then George told them something that changed the air. After you left, I asked the nurse your names. She didn't know. I asked the front desk. 3 young men carried me in and refused to leave any information. No names, no phone numbers, nothing. He shook his head. In my world, Mr. Taylor, everyone wants something. A handshake comes with a contract. A favor comes with a phone call 6 months later. Your brothers changed my tire with a blood-soaked rag. You drove my car like an ambulance. Your youngest held my hand so I wouldn't die alone. And then you vanished. He looked at Solomon. Do you have any idea how rare that is? Solomon stared at his boots. We just did what our father would have done. George nodded slowly. "Then your father was an extraordinary man, and I wish I could have shaken his hand." Diane stepped forward, opened the portfolio. George straightened, and when he spoke again, the frail old man was gone. This was the chairman, the builder. "This is not charity. I don't do charity. I do investments. And the three of you are the best investment I've seen in 40 years. First, Taylor & Sons. Elliston Automotive would fully fund the renovation and equipment upgrade. New lifts, 4 of them, diagnostic systems, customer lounge, LED lighting, signage, climate control, plus a fleet service contract. Taylor & Sons would become an authorized Elliston service center with guaranteed steady work. Investment? $600,000. Full ownership stays with the brothers. Their shop, their name, their decisions. Your father built something on this corner. I'm not here to take it. I'm here to make sure it's still standing 50 years from now. Second, Caleb. George turned to the youngest brother. I'm told you got into an engineering program and deferred. Caleb went still. He hadn't told George that. Solomon must have mentioned it during those long minutes in the ER. The Elliston Foundation will fund your complete education. Tuition, books, housing, living stipend. Any university in the country. No strings. George paused. You held a dying man's hand in the back of a car doing 80 in the rain. The least I can do is make sure you build those bridges you keep drawing. Third, Prospect Avenue. This was the one nobody expected. A $500,000 Prospect Avenue Revitalization Fund. Grants for small businesses. Home repair assistance. A youth apprenticeship program run through the new Taylor & Sons Center. Managed by a local board. Not Elliston's people. The community decides. I've watched developers gut neighborhoods like this one. Buy everything, tear it down, push people out. George shook his head. That's not building. That's erasing. This fund makes sure the people who built this block get to stay on it. Silence. Caleb broke first, turned away, fist against his mouth, shoulders shaking. Nate stepped behind him, hand on the back of his neck. Didn't say a word, just held on. Nate's eyes were wet, but that grin, that unbreakable Nate grin, crept across his face. So, does the new shop get a C? Because I've been asking Sol for 3 years, and this man keeps telling me to open a window. Laughter. Real laughter. The kind that cracks open a moment so heavy it needs somewhere to go. George laughed, then winced, hand against his ribs. Diane smiled, a full one this time. Solomon was last. He looked down the street at the faded sign, looked at his brothers, looked at this man who 12 hours ago was dying in the rain, now sitting on his porch, offering to rebuild everything Solomon had been terrified of losing. Mr. Elliston, his voice was thick. My father would have wanted me to say something wise right now, about blessings and hard work and God's timing. He stopped, swallowed. But honestly, sir? His voice cracked, just once, just enough. I'm just glad we stopped. George reached up from the step, took Solomon's hand in both of his. So am I, son. So am I. Now, if the story ended right there, with 3 brothers and a billionaire shaking hands on a porch, that would have been enough. But it didn't end there, not even close. The renovation started 3 weeks later. construction trucks, crews in hard hats. The old Taylor and Sons sign came down on a Monday morning. Solomon stood on the sidewalk and watched them lower it, held it in his hands for a long time, didn't throw it away, carried it inside and leaned it against the back wall of the office. The shop got gutted, cracked concrete replaced with sealed industrial flooring, 4 brand new hydraulic lifts, diagnostic computer stations, LED bay lighting, a customer waiting area with leather chairs, a coffee machine, and a flat screen, and air conditioning. Nate walked in the day they turned it on, stood in the middle of the bay, closed his eyes, spread his arms. Soul, bury me under lift number 3. I'm never leaving. But the brothers didn't just watch the rebuild. Solomon laid floor tile himself. Caleb painted walls on weekends. Nate calibrated every piece of equipment, wouldn't let anyone else touch the alignment rack. And when the new sign went up, Caleb painted it by hand. Not because they couldn't afford a professional one, because it mattered. Taylor and Sons Auto Body, established by Curtis Taylor Sr., an authorized Elliston service partner. Their father's name, first, biggest, above everything else. Grand reopening, a Saturday in September. Red ribbon across the bay doors. Pastor Reggie Coleman said a blessing that made half the block cry. Brenda Foster cut the ribbon, the brothers insisted. The street was packed. Neighbors from 3 blocks over, kids running around. The barbershop owner brought a speaker playing old-school R&B, same station Curtis Sr. used to play. Janet Calloway from the Evening News did a live segment. She interviewed Solomon, his one and only interview. He said one thing that made the broadcast. This story isn't about us. It's about what this neighborhood has always been. People who show up for each other. Caleb left for university that fall. Didn't defer this time. Packed a single suitcase, composition notebook on top, and hugged his brothers in the driveway so long that Nate finally said, "Bro, the semester's gonna end before you get there." Engineering program. Full ride. Tuition, housing, books, living stipend, all covered. He called Solomon every Sunday night. Short conversations, full of silence. The kind of silence that says more than words ever could. That summer, he applied for an internship at Elliston's manufacturing division. Not through George, not through Diane. Regular application portal. Same process as everyone else. He got it on merit. The apprenticeship program launched in January. 8 young people from the neighborhood, ages 16 to 22. After-school hours in the new bays at Taylor & Sons. Nate taught them, and he was born for it. Patient, funny, exacting. He'd make a kid redo a brake job 3 times until it was perfect, then buy them a soda and tell them they were the best mechanic he'd ever seen. One kid, 17, almost a dropout, finished the program and landed a full-time job at a dealership across town. His mother came to graduation, cried so hard she couldn't speak, just hugged Nate and held on. Nate, for once, didn't crack a joke. Prospect Avenue came back to life. 3 businesses received grants from the Revitalization Fund. The barber shop got new chairs and hired a second barber. A woman named Gloria opened a bakery in the empty storefront. Pastor Coleman's church got its first new roof in 30 years. The developer who'd been buying properties slowed down, then stopped. The neighborhood wasn't dying anymore. It was being rebuilt from the inside by the people who lived there. Families stayed. That was the whole point. The story went local, then national, shared hundreds of thousands of times. George Elliston released one public statement, called the Taylor brothers a reminder that character is the only currency that doesn't depreciate. Solomon declined every interview after Calloway's, every podcast, every talk show. He went back to the shop, opened at 6, closed at 9. same as always. But nothing was the same. And everyone on Prospect Avenue knew it. But the part that stays with me, the part I keep coming back to, didn't happen on camera. No news crew, no audience, no SUVs. It happened on a quiet Sunday. 6 months later. The shop was closed. Bay doors open. Late afternoon light pouring in across the new floors. Solomon was alone inside, wiping down equipment with a rag, the same way Curtis Sr. used to do it every Sunday. Slow, deliberate, almost like a prayer. The boombox sat on the counter, same spot as always, same R&B station. Some things you don't upgrade. A car pulled up outside, silver sedan, same model, same color. Solomon looked up. His hands went still. George Elliston stepped out, moving slower than before, a little thinner, but steady, upright, alone. No SUVs, no security, no Diane. Just an old man visiting a mechanic's shop on a Sunday. He walked into the bay, stopped, looked around, at the lifts, the lights, the diagnostic screens, the sign on the wall. Then he said it, quiet, matter of fact, like reading a pressure gauge. Curtis would be proud. Solomon didn't answer right away. He set down the rag, walked over to the new coffee machine, poured 2 cups, handed one to George. They sat in the customer lounge, leather chairs that still smelled new, sunlight through clean windows, R&B playing low in the background. 2 men from different worlds, drinking coffee on a Sunday in a mechanic's shop. After a while, Solomon reached into his pocket. The handkerchief, cream-colored linen, navy stitching, GWE. He'd been carrying it for 6 months, always meaning to return it, always forgetting. Or maybe not forgetting. Maybe just not ready to let go of the thing that connected that night to this moment. He set it on the table between them. George picked it up, ran his thumb over the monogram, slowly. The way you touch something that holds a person you've lost. My wife gave me this. She passed 8 years ago. He folded it carefully, put it in his jacket pocket, close to his chest. Thank you for keeping it safe. Silence. But not the empty kind. The kind that's full of everything that doesn't need saying. George finished his coffee, stood up, shook Solomon's hand at the bay door. As he walked to his car, another vehicle pulled into the service lane. A young woman, early 20s, flat tire, looking overwhelmed. George glanced back at Solomon. Solomon was already walking toward her, rag in hand. Same posture as that night. Same steady hands. George smiled, small, knowing, got in his car, and drove away. The young woman looked up at Solomon, nervous. I'm sorry, I don't know if you're open. We're always open. He knelt beside the tire, sun on his back, the sign above him catching the light. Taylor and Sons. Some people wait their whole lives for a miracle. The Taylor brothers didn't wait. They drove into a storm and made one. For a stranger, for their family, and for a neighborhood that refused to disappear. And that's the story. 3 brothers, a blown tire, a stranger dying in the rain, and a decision that took less than a second, but changed everything. No hesitation, no calculation, no what's in it for me. Just 3 men who stopped. Man, come on. Seriously? These 3 dudes, broke, bleeding, exhausted, just outran a heart attack for a complete stranger. By 1 minute. Now put yourself on that road. Pouring rain, midnight. A man you've never met is dying. You're $900 short on rent. Do you stop? Honestly?